December 29th, 1977. Sacramento, California. 51-year-old Ambrose Griffin is helping his wife carry groceries into their home. It's an ordinary Thursday, ordinary until a car slows down. 2 shots. One hits him in the chest. He collapses on his own driveway while his wife watches. That was just the beginning. 22 days later, a pregnant woman named Teresa Wallen is found in her bedroom, but found doesn't cover it. Her body had been moved, violated, drained. There was a yogurt container next to her. He drank her blood, he bathed in it, and then he stuffed dog feces down her throat. And he was just getting started. 4 more people would die in the next 4 days, including a 6-year-old boy, a baby. They called him the Vampire of Sacramento. But Richard Trenton Chase wasn't a vampire. He was something worse, something real. A man who believed Nazi death rays were drying up his blood, who thought he had to kill to survive.
This is a story that kept me up for 3 nights after researching it.
It's the story that made me check my doors twice, then 3 times. This isn't a case where the nickname is media hype. He literally drank blood. He took organs. He believed he was a vampire in the most practical, terrible sense.
This is a story about how systems failed, how warning signs were missed, and how one man's untreated psychosis led to unimaginable tragedy. Welcome to Coffee and Crime with Mom. I'm Zaylee.
I'm Nicole, also known as Mom.
Each episode, we sit down with coffee and talk through fascinating true crime cases.
And sometimes try to understand how something this terrible could happen.
So grab your coffee
and settle in.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, okay, and trust me, it gets gritty.
What are we drinking today?
Today I am doing a caramel macchiato with vanilla sweet cream instead of milk with some vanilla bean powder.
Okay, that sounds very much like you. Today I have my whipped coffee, which is strong, but added a little more sugar to it, frothed it up good before I put that ice in there, and always the almond milk, which makes it nice and creamy. Richard Trenton Chase was born on May 23rd, 1950 in Sacramento, California. And I want to start here, Zaylee, because this is one of those cases where the childhood doesn't fit the abused becomes abuser narrative we often see.
So his home life was actually fine?
More than fine. His father was strict but not abusive man. His mother was described as overprotective, maybe smothering, but loving. They weren't wealthy, but they weren't impoverished. No history of physical abuse, no sexual abuse, no neglect in the traditional sense.
So what happened?
Richard was just different from the start. As a child, he showed no interest in bonding with other children. He preferred solitary activities. He was hyperactive, had trouble concentrating, and by all accounts was already showing signs of severe emotional disturbance.
I read that he had a thing about fire.
Oh yes, pyromania. Classic triad stuff. Bedwetting, fire setting, cruelty to animals. He checked those boxes. But even the animal cruelty was weird. It wasn't just, typical childhood meanness. It was systematic. He would kill cats and then eat their remains raw.
That's disgusting and disturbing. And he did this as a kid. Like, where do you get the let's kill Whiskers? And I think I would like to know what Whiskers taste like. So let's fillet Whiskers. And then I don't know how to cook, so we're just gonna sample you. from the bone. That that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, a lot. And to think of it as a child, we're talking preteen years here. His parents knew something was wrong. They took him into a psychiatrist when he was in his early teens.
Okay, and what did they say?
The psychiatrist diagnosed him with emotional disability, which is vague to say the least. But here's where I get frustrated, Zay. This was the 1960s. Mental health understanding was limited, resources were scarce, and there wasn't really a follow-up system. He got a diagnosis, maybe some medication, and that was it.
I mean, that's tragic because I feel like that means the system failed him before he even became dangerous. And then in the 60s, a lot of people were like, oh no, it's nothing wrong with you. Like, you need your ass whooped, or he needs to just work harder, or, whatever the case is. It was no real acknowledgement. But I feel like for that time, his parents did, like, check in. They got him help. They were trying. So to them, at that time, that's what they could do.
Right. And to keep in mind that there still would have been a stigma on it that I think we'll see affect some decisions later. But the system just kept failing him. By high school, Richard was using drugs, marijuana, LSD, occasionally cocaine. He was trying to self-medicate, trying to quiet whatever was happening in his head.
And while he was doing all of this, was he like a loner? Did he have friends? Or was he just like the kid that would like, I'm doing all these drugs, I'm doing it by myself, I'm quiet in my room, nobody really knows what's going on? Or was he like at least social? Like, I got one or two friends, we kick it.
Almost no friends. He almost had absolutely no friends. He couldn't maintain friendships. He had no romantic relationships that we know of. He was isolated, increasingly paranoid, and the drug use was making everything worse. By his late teens, he was having full-blown psychotic episodes.
That's so sad. That's like depressing for him, for like me for him. Yeah, because like you're trying to help it, but like you can't help it. And then like what kind of episodes? What was happening in these like psychotic episodes?
That's a very good question. So he believed his heart had stopped beating. He would check his pulse constantly, convinced he was dead or dying. He thought his blood was turning to powder. He believed that something, Nazis, UFOs, the government, was targeting him with death rays that would dry up all his blood unless he consumed blood from others. And I think it's important to point out that these things that he believed, they don't make any sense. Because our minds don't work like his did, but they made total, complete sense to him. He believed he needed to do these things, which makes him kind of stand apart from other killers.
That kind of draws into like the psychotic and psycho, or what is the bad and the mad?
So having psychosis or being psychotic.
Yeah. So either one is bad and one is mad. And I think he's mad. Like, he can't figure out what's going on. And that's horrible to have to, like, really think that you're dying. Like, you're just living your life and these are the thoughts. And as somebody who has, like, anxiety, oh my God, I can only imagine what that is like, because my brain makes up things and it full on can send me into, like, I feel like my heart is stopping, like, because the anxiety and, like, it's just crippling. So to feel like all of that, oh my goodness, that the state he was in had to have been horrible to live like that. And early on, I mean, his delusion, the little vampire delusion, is forming. This is where it starts, like, is what it looks like.
Yes, and it was more than a delusion. To Richard, this was physical reality. He wasn't playing vampire. He believed he was fighting for his actual survival against actual weapons. In 1972, when he was 22, things came to a head, and he was hospitalized.
I guess to me, this is where the story gets frustrating, because he was in the system. He was getting treatment.
Yes, Richard was committed to a mental institution in 1972 after being treated for blood poisoning. He'd been injecting rabbit's blood into his veins.
He was doing what, and he got what poisoning? Like, these are things.
Yes. He believed that animal blood would replenish his own. He'd catch rabbits, kill them, and inject their blood directly into his bloodstream. Unsurprisingly, this made him very sick, and he ended up in the hospital with a massive infection. And that's when they transferred him to the mental institution.
And how long was he at the mental institution?
He was there for 1 year. 1 year of treatment for severe, obvious schizophrenia. And then they released him.
1 year. That's insane.
With antipsychotic medication and instructions to follow up, which he didn't do. He stopped taking his medication almost immediately because he believed the pills were poison. The pills that were supposed to help him, he thought were a part of the conspiracy against him.
My goodness, this is so depressing for me. It's so depressing. It makes me so sad for him, because somebody with my own mental health issues, like, obviously I don't have, at least I've never been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and I do have several other mental illnesses, but schizophrenia is not one of them, and that just is horrible. And so now he's just out here, he's unmedicated, delusional, and is he living on his own? Like, what's happening?
So his parents had divorced by this point. His father was trying to maintain some contact, but Richard was drifting. He was in and out of hospitals over the next few years. In 1976, he was institutionalized again after being found naked in the Nevada desert, covered in cow's blood, convinced he had killed a Nazi UFO.
Okay. This, like, instances like this, the system is definitely failing, because first of all, this is after repeated hospitalizations, institutionalized, and they let you go, and now you're found feeling like you killed a Nazi UFO. Not just a Nazi, but the UFOs for the Nazis. I don't know. That's like another step. That's really crazy. And why do you keep letting him go? Why keep letting him out if he's repeatedly showing that he's not going to stick with the steps that he needs to make sure his schizophrenia is under control? Even though he's not hurting other people, that's not safe for him.
Right, and it's out of control. It's so easy to feel sorry for him at these different stages where help was right there, and then he would get better. They would medicate him, he would get better, and they were missing that his mind was turning those pills into poison. Not just, it makes me feel weird, and so I'm going to stop. In his brain, in his reality, those were poison. And the delusions were getting more elaborate, more specific. He was connecting his paranoia about Nazis with his fears about UFOs and his need for blood. Everything was merging into one massive conspiracy against him.
And let me guess. They tragically released him again.
And they released him again. In 1977, his father tried one more time. He bought Richard an apartment, hoping that stability would help. Richard was 27 years old, living alone, completely unmedicated, surrounded by his delusions.
And that right there is the thing, because you keep letting him go, and you said that they let him go because he got better. But here's the thing, he wasn't better. He was just medicated. When you let him go, you were forcing him to take the medicine. So clearly his schizophrenia is at least, like, I guess, veiled by the meds. So he's not better. Clearly he's not better. And you see he's not taking the meds. It's such a failure. And then this is when the animals started dying.
Right. Neighbors reported him catching and eating animals raw. Dogs, cats, rabbits, birds. He would tear them apart with his hands and teeth, consume them while they were still warm. The apartment was covered in blood and animal remains.
My God. And did his neighbors call the police? I would have called the police.
They did. Police visited several times, but here's the thing. He wasn't technically breaking any laws that they could prove. Animal cruelty laws were different then, And he was careful. He'd clean up or they'd find nothing they could charge him with. He was weird. He was disturbed, but he hadn't hurt a person yet. And I think when we go over this, I wonder his dad getting this apartment. It's almost like his parents didn't know what to do with him. I'm sure if he was doing this out in the neighborhood, he was doing these things in their home. And it's like, let me just put him over here. Let me just put him over here and hope he...
I can concur with that. And was like the 72-hour hold like not a thing back then? Like, they could have you admitted or institutionalized for 72 hours so they can like go over it. That's not obviously that wasn't a thing, because he's just left there in this apartment that his dad put him in with his delusions and his hunger for raw blood and whatever animals at this point. Just give it to me.
Yep, whatever he can get his hands on. And they left him there until December 29th, 1977. The day after Christmas, essentially. People are still in that holiday haze, talking about decorations, returning gifts, getting back to routine. Ambrose Griffin was doing just that, a normal day. 51 years old, he was an engineer and married with 2 kids. Living in a quiet Sacramento neighborhood, he and his wife were coming home from shopping, carrying groceries up the driveway when Richard Chase drove by. Chase didn't know him. This was random. Completely random. Chase saw this man, this ordinary father, and something in his delusional mind said target. He slowed his car, raised his .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol, and fired 2 shots. One hit Griffin in the chest. Ambrose collapsed in front of his wife, died right there on his own driveway, and Chase just drove away.
Did he get out and take anything? Did he do anything with the body?
No, and this is important, Zay. This first killing was different from what came after. No mutilation, no blood drinking, just a shooting, almost like a test or a warm-up. He proved he could kill a human being. He got away with it, and it seems to have unlocked something or confirmed something in his mind, because 3 weeks later, he wasn't just killing, he was feeding. And this is where investigators start to get a feeling. Not a full profile yet, but a direction.
What kind of direction are you talking about?
Well, because a killing like this, random, fast, no interaction, points toward what's known as a disorganized offender.
What does that mean? They have no plan?
Not no plan, but no structure. Disorganized offenders act on impulse. They choose victims randomly, leave evidence behind, and are often dealing with severe mental illness. And looking back, that's exactly what Chase was.
January 23rd, 1978. Teresa Wallen was 22 years old and 3 months pregnant.
3 months pregnant. I want everyone to sit with that for a moment. She was building a family. She had a husband who loved her. She had plans and hopes in a nursery maybe half thought out in her mind.
Her husband David was at work. Teresa was home alone. Their front door was unlocked.
Richard Chase, who had been driving around looking for an opportunity, saw the house, saw the unlocked door, and walked right in. Teresa was in the living room. She probably never heard him coming. Chase shot her 3 times, once in the hand, twice in the head. Killed her instantly, but he didn't stop there. He dragged her body to the bedroom, and then the mutilation began. He stabbed her repeatedly with a butcher knife. He cut her open from throat to groin. He removed several internal organs, including her spleen, kidney, and liver. He took her blood. He brought a bucket. He collected her blood and bathed in it. He sliced off one of her nipples and took it with him. And then he drank her blood. He used a yogurt cup he found in her kitchen to scoop it up and drink it. And then the dog feces. Yes, before he left, he went to the backyard, found dog feces, and stuffed it down her throat. Why? We don't know. Maybe to degrade her further. Maybe it had some meaning in his delusional framework. Maybe he just could. David Wallen came home from work, walked into his house and found his pregnant wife mutilated, violated, desecrated. The trauma destroyed him. He became a heavy drinker, couldn't hold a job. He died just a few years later, essentially drank himself to death. One killer, one act of incomprehensible violence, and it ripples outward, destroying everyone it touches.
And Chase, where was he while all of his actions were causing this ripple downwards effect?
Chase was driving home with his trophies, the organs, the blood, the nipple. He would consume them over the next few days. He believed he was healing himself, replenishing his blood, protecting himself from the death rays. And yeah, this feels different than most cases we've covered, because most serial killers fall into categories like power and control, sexual motivation, financial gain. But Chase doesn't fit cleanly into any of those. What we're seeing here is closer to what's called a process-driven killer. It means the act itself is tied to a belief system. He's not killing for control. He's not killing for pleasure in the traditional sense. He believes the process, the blood, the organs, is keeping him alive. So the violence isn't the goal, the belief is.
Okay, so the police were investigating, but they had no leads, no connection between Griffin and Wallen, no witnesses, nothing.
And Sacramento was terrified. 2 brutal murders, seemingly random, with no explanation. People started locking their doors, buying guns. The city was on edge. January 27, 1978, 4 days after Teresa Wallen. Chase was escalating. The gap between murders was shrinking. He was becoming more confident, more desperate, more ravenous.
Evelyn Miroth was 38 years old, divorced, living with her 6-year-old son Jason and her 22-month-old nephew David. She was babysitting David while his mother worked.
Evelyn had a visitor that day. Daniel Meredith, 51, a neighbor and friend. He'd come over to check on her, maybe have coffee. He knocked on the door. No answer.
The door was locked this time, but Chase had found another way in.
He'd gone around to the back of the house, found a door or window. By the time Daniel Meredith walked around to investigate, Chase was already inside. Meredith never made it past the threshold. Chase shot him in the head at point-blank range, turned his body over, stole his wallet and keys, then went looking for others. Jason Miroth was 6 years old. He heard the commotion, ran to his mother's bedroom. Chase was already there. Evelyn was trying to protect her son, but Chase shot her in the head. Then he turned the gun on Jason. 2 shots, point blank. He was just a little boy. Just a little boy who ran to his mom's room. That's all he did. He ran to his mom, and he died.
What about the baby?
David Ferreira, 22 months old. Chase found him in his crib, shot him in the head. But here's the thing that haunts me, Zaylee. He didn't mutilate the baby there. He took the body with him.
This is horrible. This is horrible. So he kills the mom in front of the 2-year-old, turns around and shoots the poor little 2-year-old in the head, and then finds the baby in his crib, shoots him in the head, and then he took the baby with him.
He put David Ferreira's body in a box and carried it out to Daniel Meredith's car, the car he'd just stolen, and drove away. The baby's body wasn't found for almost 2 months. March 24th, it was discarded in a vacant lot like garbage.
But what about the adults? Are you telling me he did mutilate them? Everybody was mutilated but the kids.
Yeah, Evelyn Meredith suffered the same fate as Teresa Wallen. Rape post-mortem, mutilated, organs removed, blood collected and consumed, and Daniel Meredith was left relatively intact. Chase just took his valuables. Jason was shot twice in the head, but his body wasn't violated. I don't know why. Maybe because he was a child. Maybe Chase had some boundary, some fragment of humanity that said, not this one. Or maybe he just didn't have the time before the baby started crying, or something else drew his attention. And this is where the profile becomes very clear. Compare this to Ted Bundy.
I mean, Ted Bundy planned. He controlled his victims and he avoided detection carefully, like real careful.
Very intentional, exactly. Now compare that to Chase. No planning, no control, no attempt to hide. That's the opposite end of the spectrum. And then there's Jeffrey Dahmer. Dahmer had compulsions, but still maintained control. Chase, he's losing control of everything, including himself.
3 people dead in one house, plus the baby taken. How does nobody hear this? Nobody calls the police.
Well, the houses were spaced out. It was daytime. Most people were at work. And a .22 caliber pistol, while deadly, isn't that loud, especially not from inside a house. By the time anyone thought to check, Chase was gone.
But he almost got caught immediately.
Oh yes, this is where the story gets almost surreal. Chase didn't flee the scene efficiently. He was in the house for a while doing his rituals, and a neighbor saw him.
A 16-year-old named David Wallen, no relation to Teresa Wallen.
David Wallen was the neighbor who saw Chase leaving the Meredith house wearing an orange parka and carrying a box. An orange parka, I would definitely think would stand out. He thought it was suspicious and called the police, but when police arrived, Chase was long gone. But they found the bodies, and they found something else that would break the case wide open. Chase had left fingerprints everywhere. He wasn't being careful anymore. He was in a frenzy, acting on pure delusion and need.
The next day, January 28th, police were doing door-to-door checks in the neighborhood. They knocked on Richard Chase's apartment door. And before we jump into that, all of this is just insane. This man has me like jaw to the floor because everything you did in there, but then to hear the whole time you're doing all these crazy acts to this family, you're wearing an orange parka. You are not trying to blend in. This is why we talk about the bad and the mad, because clearly he's mad, like Mad Hatter, because you're not trying to cover anything up, and this is not trying to be secretive. This is the middle of the day. I don't care about none of this. I need what I needed. I'm doing it. I'm not trying to just be evil. This is what I need.
Right. And think about how bloody he had to be after doing that to her. And he just walks out of the house and totally bloody. He's not concerned. He doesn't see it as wrong. That's what makes it crazy. He doesn't see this as him murdering someone. He is getting what he needs to survive. That's the difference. That's one of the main things, the thing about him that shows that he is mad. And he was wearing the orange parka, the exact one the witness had described. They asked to see his guns. He showed them his .22 unregistered, illegal. They arrested him on the weapons charge, but they didn't have enough to hold him for the murders yet. They needed to search his apartment. And when they did, it was a horror show. The walls were covered in blood, human blood. There were pieces of flesh in the blender, organs in the refrigerator, human organs, a calendar with dates of the murders marked with the words, today.
Oh my goodness. Can you imagine being an officer walking in here? And you're like, I don't feel like you're walking in here thinking like, oh, this is about to be like off the wall, and you walk into it and it's just a complete shit show. Like, it's hell everywhere. We got blood everywhere, organs, stuff in the blender, like with the kind of therapy they probably needed out of this. And then he is keeping a schedule for the murders. Like, this is his regimen.
Yes, he'd been planning and organizing his life around these killings. And the baby, David Ferrer's brain, was in the refrigerator. Parts of it, anyway. He'd been eating it.
Oh, what? What? Eating the baby's brain? So no wonder he took the baby. Mm-hmm. And oh my God, that poor baby. Why the baby's brain? I need to know, like, what part of his delusion was like, okay, we're gonna murder and do all this disgusting stuff to all of these people and violate everything. And I don't necessarily feel like he did anything, or I don't remember seeing or hearing anything of him doing anything other than taking this baby brain. So why take the baby's brain? Why is this what you're eating? The baby's brain. And then he was so, like, it seems like he was organized. Like, was he not? That's what it's giving. It's planned.
Yeah, and that's the interesting part. He shows moments of organization, like marking dates, but overall, he is still disorganized. And that combination is often seen in offenders driven by several psychosis, because the behavior isn't guided by logic. It's guided by the delusion. And I think that's what we have to remember when we're going through these crazy events, that all of it, it's the delusion. It's not the murder. It's not taking the baby. And it's weird because I would say the only reason I could think he would take the baby and eat the brain would be because of things we see, like with, quote unquote, devil worshiping type of rituals where it's the virgin or the baby because it's so pure. But then that is, although a warped logic, it's a logic which just shows how the delusion is guiding him.
That I don't even understand. I have no words for this.
That's what he was. That's what untreated severe mental illness combined with the complete system failure can produce. A monster. But a monster who was once a troubled little boy who needed help and never got it.
That's so sad. It makes me sad because all of this could have been prevented if, like, back in the day they just took care of, like, mental health like they needed to, or even went into studying it on purpose. Richard Chase was charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder. The trial began in January 1979.
His defense attorney was public defender Ferris Salami, and he had an impossible job because Chase was clearly, obviously, severely mentally ill, but he was also clearly, obviously guilty. The insanity defense, they tried. They argued that Chase was legally insane, that he didn't understand the nature of his crimes, or that they were wrong because of his delusions. He believed he was saving his own life. In his mind, this was self-defense against the death race.
But the prosecution, John Morgan and Ronald Halgren, they had a different argument.
They said that Chase knew what he was doing was illegal. He wore a mask during some of the attacks. He ran from police. He hid evidence. He stole wallets and valuables. Those aren't the actions of someone who doesn't understand their crimes are wrong. Those are the actions of someone trying to get away with it.
I feel like certain things in here are, like, off for me, especially, like, we do so many different stories and we watch so many different documentaries, and The Mask is interesting to me because I don't know many people who are out here committing crimes and, like, they don't stick to at least, like, what they're wearing. It's not like a switch up often. So The Mask being not constant, like sometimes he wore it, sometimes he didn't, that stands out for me.
Right, and he wore it during the Teresa Wallen attack, apparently, but not during the Meredith murders. His control was slipping. His organization was falling apart. He was devolving as the pressure built. So another example is, he wore a mask during some of them, but he also wore a bright orange parka jacket. So even if he's trying to cover his face, he's still standing out. It's still disorganized. Erratic, bizarre. He tried to convince the judge that one of the prosecution attorneys was a Nazi UFO death ray spy. He drew swastikas on his notebooks. He claimed he was Jewish. He wasn't. and that the trial was a Nazi conspiracy. But the jury didn't buy the insanity defense. On May 8, 1979, Richard Trenton Chase was convicted of 6 counts of first-degree murder. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. And the sentence? Death. Gas chamber. The judge called his crimes the most grotesque, bizarre, and heinous he'd ever seen.
Chase was sent to San Quentin State Prison for death row.
And here's something that surprises people. He got better. With regular antipsychotic medication, supervised and enforced in prison, his delusions faded. He started to understand on some level what he'd done.
See, that just circles back to what I was saying earlier, that they just kept releasing him because they kept saying he was better. He's not better, he's medicated. It's a difference. It's not that he has control or can really understand what's going on or be able to like decipher between the thoughts that's going on in his head. He's medicated, so it doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a different, his brain is operating differently. So I don't know like why that would be surprising, because he was getting better. He kept getting better or kept getting medicated, and they kept releasing him because he was medicated. So obviously the medicine was working. Mm-hmm. But did he feel like remorse, like while they were going through the trial, and they say he's coming back through all of, or after, because now he's on death row. Right. So did he feel remorse at any point, or was it just like, I'm getting an understanding, but like it is what it is?
Well, not really. He was quiet, withdrawn. He refused to see his mother. She tried to visit, and he rejected her. Maybe shame, maybe just continued paranoia. We don't know. He didn't wait for the gas chamber. December 26, 1980, 2 years after his conviction, Chase had been hoarding his antidepressant medication, trazodone specifically. He took all of it at once, overdosed in his cell. He was found dead. Some people say he finally faced what he was and couldn't live with it. Others say the medication just made him organized enough to complete a plan he'd always had. We'll never know. He was 30 years old. 6 people dead, 3 families destroyed, a city traumatized, and a system that failed at every single point where it could have intervened.
Before we talk about the failures, we need to understand exactly what Richard Chase was. He fits into a very specific category, a disorganized offender, driven by severe paranoid schizophrenia, acting under somatic delusions, meaning he believed his body was physically failing, and most importantly, he can be understood as a delusion-driven process killer. So the violence wasn't the goal. Once again, it was the belief. And for him, it was survival. And I want to talk about the failures here, Mom, because this case makes me angry for very, 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 very many reasons. And I feel like I've been pretty vocal about it.
Well, yeah, it should make you angry. It should make us all angry to see that these people didn't have to die. He could have been helped. So many lives were destroyed and taken away because of the failures of the system.
I completely agree. He was in institutions twice. He was seen by psychiatrists. He was reported to the police multiple times for animal cruelty, with the blood in the apartment and the animal body parts still there. His father tried to help him, at least to the best that he could. And at every single turn, the system said, not our problem, or not a severe enough problem, or we don't have the resources, which all seems like BS. Maybe it's the truth. And if it is true, that's just a very unfortunate and sad reality.
Yeah, the 1970s were a terrible time for mental health care in America. Deinstitutionalization was happening, releasing patients from long-term facilities with promises of community care that never materialized. The money didn't follow the patients, so you had severely ill people living on streets, in boarding houses, in apartments alone with no support. Chase was exactly that, a product of a broken system. But here's the complexity, Zay. Even if the system had worked perfectly, would it have stopped this? Severe schizophrenia is hard to treat. Some people don't respond to medication, some refuse it. You can't force someone to take pills forever unless they're an immediate danger to themselves or to others.
I feel like he definitely was in immediate danger. He was eating raw animals as a child, okay? As a child. This is not adult activity. This is not where normal people start all the as a kid. So how do you not feel like he was in immediate danger after all the hospitalizations, the institutionalizations, all the zations, and they just kept letting him go?
Well, the truth is that wasn't enough legally to commit him long term. The standards were different. The resources weren't there. And yes, maybe if he'd been in a secure facility in 1977, people would be alive. Maybe, probably, almost certainly. But we can't know. What we can know is that the system we had then failed everyone involved. It failed Richard Chase, who needed help and got institutions and released. And it failed his victims, who deserve to live ordinary lives and die ordinary deaths.
Okay, and what about now? How has anything changed from then to now?
Well, some things. California has stricter animal cruelty laws. Mental health commitment standards have evolved, though they're still controversial. Police are somewhat better trained to recognize mental health crises, but we still have people falling through cracks. We still have untreated severe mental illness leading to violence. Not usually this extreme, thank God, but the pattern, missed warning signs, system failures, tragedy is still there. It was there with the Aurora shooter, with the Tucson shooter, with so many others.
The Vampire of Sacramento left a legacy of horror, but maybe he also left a lesson about what happens when we ignore the mentally ill until it's too late. And sadly, that is often the case. A lot of people who go on to be killers, or especially serial killers with stuff like this, are some people who have some kind of like mental health issue that was like never addressed, or if it was addressed, it was not addressed in the correct way. They just dressed it up. Yeah.
Before we close, we want to name the victims again, not as statistics, but as people.
Ambrose Griffin, 51, engineer, father, husband, killed helping his wife with groceries.
Teresa Wallen, 22, pregnant, wife, future mother, killed in her own bedroom, her body desecrated.
Daniel Meredith, 51, neighbor, friend, killed checking on someone he cared about.
Evelyn Mira, 38, mother, divorced woman building a life, killed protecting her son.
Jason Meredith, 6, little boy, son, nephew, killed running to his mother.
David Ferrer, 22 months, baby, nephew, innocent, killed before he had a chance to live.
We also remember the survivors in spirit. David Wallen, Teresa's husband, who never recovered. The Griffin children who lost their father. The Meredith and Ferrer families shattered. The trauma ripples outward and lasts generations.
So the world changed after cases like this. Not just Sacramento, everywhere. People stopped trusting, started locking doors, started looking at strangers differently.
Is that bad though? Being cautious?
No, it's survival instinct, but I do miss the openness, the trust. I grew up in a time when you knew your neighbors, when kids played outside unsupervised, when doors were open.
Yeah, when I was growing up, we could play outside till the street lights came on, but now we have Ring cameras and neighborhood watch apps and panic rooms.
We have safety, but we lost something too. Community, connection, the idea that most people are good and won't hurt you. Most people are good. Richard Chase was a statistical anomaly, a perfect storm of biology and environment and system failure. He wasn't representative of humanity. He was an aberration.
An aberration who changed how we live.
Unfortunately, yes. So lock your doors, crime fam. But don't lock your hearts. That's my mom wisdom for the day.
That was so cheesy, Mom.
All right, it was, but it's true. Be safe, but stay open. Be cautious, but stay kind.